Thank you. Thank you. So how are you? Mr. President, welcome. Glad you're here and glad to have you back. He's been here several times, 3 or 4 times at Saddleback Church. As Kay said, Saddleback is observing Kwibuka 25, observance of the 25th anniversary of the genocide of the Tutsi. And we stand in solidarity with the nation of Rwanda that this never be forgotten, that it has to be remembered. Last night, since you weren't here, I interviewed the Archbishop of Rwanda, Laurent Banda. He's here, right here. Stand up, Bishop. Archbishop Banda, glad you're here. Thank you. And thank you so much. I see Mary Kamanzi down here. Mary is the director of Purpose Driven in Rwanda. Stand up, Mary. Good to see you. And thank you. And the ambassador to the United States from Rwanda, I see you here. Please stand up. Great. Thank you. And my old buddy, Joe Ritchie, who's the first guy that introduced me to President Kagame. Stand up, Joe. Good. Now, we've been friends almost 15 years. So I want to show you some photos on the screen here. You can look up here, Mr. President. I'll look this way, you can look that way. Here we are. This is at the 25th anniversary of Saddleback Church, and the primary speaker, President Paul Kagame. Here he is speaking at the 25th anniversary at Angel Stadium, which was packed out. Then a few months later, when we went to Rwanda, and he's greeting me at Amahoro Stadium, where I'm going to speak there in Amahoro. Here he is telling me a great joke. Okay, and I've used it on you several times. You're going to see a lot of pictures like this, where we're kind of conferring together at different meetings. Here's another one. See, he's giving me advice on my family right there. And here I'm telling him a joke, and he's kind of grinning. And then we're just talking to each other in different meetings. Then this was at the inauguration of President Kagame, where he had asked me to pray. I'm holding up my Rwanda passport, okay, so that I'm Rwandan. And then here was when we gave the award to President Kagame as a Man of Peace, our highest peace award, which he received. And here we are praying together. And so we've had a long conversation and commitment to each other. Saddleback is committed to the nation of Rwanda long term. I thought I'd give you a little update before we began that, the peace plan began in Rwanda at his invitation. It's now all over the world. We've sent over 26,000 Saddleback members to 197 countries, but it all started in Rwanda. And in Rwanda, about 10% of those 26,000, over that, nearly 3,000, 2,783 Saddleback members have actually gone and served in Rwanda. So I'm going to ask at all 20 of our campuses right now, if you have been to Rwanda, would you stand up right now in all 20 campuses? Okay? Okay, look at this. Great. That's great. God bless you. These people have launched over 400 different training initiatives, training nurses, working with the police departments, working with farmers, working with judges, working with pastors. Over 4,558 pastors have been enrolled in the 3-year educational training program of Purpose Driven. And we figured out that we have bought over 6,800 plane tickets to Rwanda. So some agency is really happy with us. I'm not sure who that is. Now, Mr. President, in the past we've talked about reconciliation a lot.
Right.
But this time I want us to talk about resilience. How do you bounce back from trauma? We're in a series that I've been teaching on pain and on trauma. And there's no greater example than Rwanda having greater trauma and having bounced back from that. And so what I'd like to do is I listened to your Kwibuka 25 message. And I saw in Rwanda some principles of rebounding. And what I'd like to do is introduce each of these principles, maybe read a quote from you, and then let you talk to us about these principles. So if you have your notes, on the back side or the front side, we're talking about the first steps to recovering from trauma. And we can see these all identified in the nation of Rwanda. Now, these are not the only steps. It's just what we have time for today. And each of these steps take a lot of time. You have to be patient with yourself. The process is slow. Recovery is not instant. It's not overnight. You can't rush through these. In fact, the more painful the trauma is, probably the longer it takes for you to recover from it. It's more important for you to go deep in your recovery than it is to go fast. So let me give you the first principle, and I'm going to read a quote from the president, and we'll talk about this. The first principle in recovering from a trauma is you need to accept help and support from others. Accept help and support from others. It's almost impossible to recover from trauma by yourself. We're wired to need each other. We need each other to recover. You're not going to get well on your own. First, you need somebody who's gone through what you're going through. The Bible says this in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, God comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort others. Then when others are troubled, we can give them the same comfort that God has given us. Now, what that verse implies is this. There are people out there who've already been through what you're going through. There are people out there who've already been through what you're going through. You need to seek them out. You need to get their help. You need to enlist their wisdom and support. This is called following Jesus. Galatians 6:2, by helping each other's troubles and burdens, you're obeying the law of Christ. What is that? That's the law, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, you need other people in your life. You need a family. And maybe your family died, as in the genocide. Or maybe your family is unavailable. But you need a family. You need a spiritual family. At Saddleback Church, we have over 7,000 small groups that are families. And if your physical family isn't available, you need to create one. And the best example of this is Rwanda, where you created new families. And I want to read this quote. In your Kwibuka 25 speech, you said, in 1994, there was no hope, only darkness. Today, light radiates from this place. How did it happen? Rwanda became a family once again. The arms of our people intertwined to constitute the pillars of our nation. We hold each other up. Talk about that.
Well, thank you, Rick, for this invitation and the opportunity to be here talking to the wonderful audience and members of Saddleback Church. And I thank you and Kay for always being kind to us and welcoming, and appreciate that. Now, it's first of all, it's very difficult. We have had a tragic situation in our country. 1 million plus people have died, many others with wounds and all kinds of destruction. So here, every individual will understand, have their own struggles, have their own problems to deal with. The starting point is to make sure that these individuals don't feel they are alone or left alone. They must, an environment has to be created where somebody may start thinking there is somebody to look up to. There's a friend, there's a neighbor, there's somebody somewhere who may not only be having their problems of their own, but may have something to share, and therefore, in that sharing and getting together, problems are addressed. So, and if you look at the background of our history, if you look at our history and the background of these problems, First, the country was divided. There was such ideology and politics that played out to the extent you had a section of population made to believe the others are different, and not only different, they should hate each other. So we found ways of saying, no, this country has been a nation of people with a lot in common and less in terms of differences in actual fact. So we identified...
Not as different as everybody would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So we tried to identify those things that we can build on, that people will believe, after all, we are a family. Indeed, we are the same people. We may be different individuals standing here and there, but at the same time, we have a lot in common. We have a lot of common aspirations. We have a number of things. So we emphasize this unity, coming together, and in the process, realizing formation of a family, the feeling at least of a family. And once we achieved this, then those victims, the people who were affected, some were affected more than others, but definitely these survivors were affected to the extreme. So we created the conditions to make them feel that they are not alone. They've lost their family members, they've lost everything, but they are not alone. There are others who want to identify with them, who want to be with them, who want to feel together their pain with them. And around that, that's when we found a way forward.
So building that sense of family was the starting point for recovery.
It was a starting point. The second point was also to make sure that the truth about what happened keeps coming up. And the truth is liberating in a sense. When people get to understand, of course, there is a lot of anger that goes on, there is a lot of fear that follows with that kind of a situation. But you want to bring out the truth as well. And around the truth, you will find levels of accountability. And as long as there is that process of accountability based on the truth, the other person who is so adversely affected starts feeling at least that there is a way, and the other story about building a family starts also taking root. There is a process of forming unity and a family, then there is a process of the truth, then there is a process of...
So the family has to be built not on lies, it's got to be built on the truth.
There's no question about that.
Let me read you, I thought this was really eloquent. He said, our bodies and our minds bear amputations and scars, but none of us is alone. That's a powerful statement. You know, after all of the genocide. Our bodies and minds bear amputations and scars, but none of us is alone. Together we've woven the tattered threads of unity into a new tapestry. Sisters had to become mothers. Neighbors had to become uncles. Strangers became friends. We created new bonds of solidarity to console and to renew each other. Rwanda is a family. That's why we exist despite all we've gone through. That's powerful. That's eloquent, Mr. President. Now, you went from that into this second principle, talking about truth. I want you to write this down. I hope you heard what he just said. The second key to recovery is to focus on what's true, not what you feel. Focus on what's true, not what you feel. When you're traumatized, two things can happen to your emotions. First, your emotions can get disconnected, and second, your emotions can get distorted. Either one of these things can happen. When you've gone through a real trauma of any kind, first, when emotional pain is unbearable, we disconnect from our emotions. And you actually stop feeling anything. You're numb. you're kind of dead inside. You're so painful it shuts down. You don't feel anything. You kind of insulate and you isolate. And when you've gone through trauma, one of the problems is you don't feel anything anymore for a while. A number of people, they disconnect, and you kind of stuff it in a box, and it has to gently be reawakened. But also, when you go through trauma, often our emotions get distorted, and we start believing lies, or we believe things that are true that aren't really true. Let me read you this verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Paul, of course, went through many, many traumas in life, shipwrecks and beatings and stonings and all kinds of things. 2 Corinthians 1, 8 and 9, Paul says, we were crushed and completely overwhelmed. That's called trauma. And we thought, notice he says, we thought we'd never live through it. We expected to die. Many people, I'm sure, felt that way in the genocide. We thought we'd never live through it, and we expected to die. That's what you're feeling in trauma. But as a result, he said, we learned not to trust in our own feelings and ourselves, but to trust in God. Paul says we thought we were going to die. His feelings were wrong. He didn't die. Now, let me just say this before I ask the president a question. Sometimes victims actually in trauma end up blaming themselves. And they start saying things like, well, it was my fault, or I deserved this, or I'm a bad person and that's why this happened to me, or I'm no good, or there's something really, really wrong with me. Those are all lies. They're not the truth. They're lies. But when you're in trauma, sometimes the victim actually starts blaming themselves. The antidote is what Jesus said in John 8:32, the truth sets you free. And so you need to listen to the truth, not your feelings. You need God's view of you. And you may, when you've gone through trauma, need to change the way you talk to yourself. I want you to write this down. I want you to write these 3 things down. And then, Mr. President, we're going to talk about this. The trauma is not my fault. We're talking about the kind of trauma that is perpetrated against you by someone evil. The trauma is not my fault. The trauma, number 2, the trauma is not my identity. And number 3, the trauma is not my future. Trauma is not my fault. It's not my identity, not my future. Now, Mr. President, you had to lead an entire nation that was traumatized. Literally everybody in the country. There was no non-traumatized person. So how do you lead a traumatized nation to say, wait, it's not my fault, it's not my future, it's not my identity? What would you say about that? How did you do that? How did you lead an entire traumatized nation?
We started by talking about this quest for unity that happens, where we create a feeling of a family. We talked also about the truth. So that process leads to creating certain conditions that will enable people to think beyond their feelings and what has happened to them. But at the same time, we are also aware that you can't dictate feelings. You can't dictate to someone how they should feel.
You can't command a feeling.
You can't do that. So the best you can do is to create that environment where somebody can start seeing things happen. You want to do things, you want to be there, you want to communicate, and then in the end, the truth starts unfolding to someone that after all it is not there. They shouldn't be blaming themselves. It's not their fault. So the truth will keep bringing that up. And with everything that happens that can be done, you don't just communicate, you do things. When we have been out there helping out as much as we can, and it is like a family trying to help. When the country is investing and is trying to do certain things for education, for health, for shelter, for all kinds of things, and then bringing in the very people who have been traumatized. And actually also showing them that, no, they are not helpless.
They're not helpless.
Yes, it's not a hopeless situation for them.
Right.
That they can even pick themselves up together with other members of this family, do something that takes everyone along, even with these very difficult conditions. So you just have to have this presence of people saying, we feel with you, we want to be with you, we want to act together, and be able to create a better future. So that's what we kept trying. All kinds of things that could be tried have been tried, and still communicating to the person who has suffered, the victim, that no, all is not lost. They have lost a lot, but all is not lost. They still can pick themselves up together with the family that we have tried to build in the country, and create a better future than the life we lived in the past.
I want to read you this quote. You said, genocide hibernates in denial. Both before and after the killing, there's a long chain of events that are interconnected. That's why revisionism, which is denying the truth, denying the truth that it really happened, is not merely demeaning, it's profoundly dangerous. What happened here must never happen again. Our country cannot afford to live by twists of fate and revisionism. We must never forget the truth. We must be deliberate and decisively guided by humility.
Yes.
All right, let's go to the third key to recovery, and it is this. And again, you can see this in Rwanda. Waste no energy on revenge, learn to forgive. Waste no energy on revenge, learn to forgive. Trauma depletes your energy. Any kind of trauma just drains you of your energy. You're going to need energy to recover, to rebound, to have resilience. You can't afford to waste your energy on anything else, so that for your own sake, you need to not focus on the revenge, because you're going to need that energy to recover yourself. If you waste your energy on resentment or retaliation or revenge, then you don't have that energy for yourself. You got to decide, do I want to be bitter or do I want to be better? Where am I going to put the energy? Anytime you hold on to hurt, you actually are allowing that person to continue to hurt you, even though it's already happened. When you hold on to hurt, you just keep on letting them hurt you over and over and over. Now, I know what some of you say. You say, well, what about justice? Well, justice is important. And the Bible says that's the role of God and government. It's not your role. It's not my role to be a vigilante. It's not my role to go out there and seek revenge and retaliation. The Bible says it's God's role to administer justice, and he has ordained government to administer justice. If you want to read that, it's Romans 13, whole chapter of the Bible about God telling governments are to enforce the laws. Let me read you two verses. Romans 12:19, God says, don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging and I'll take care of it. Now, there's a big difference between justice and personal retaliation. But he's saying, God says, judging and justice are my job, and I've ordained the government to do it. Look at the next verse, Proverbs 16:12. Good leaders do not tolerate evil, because justice is what makes a government strong. So you say, well, okay, so what do I do with all my negative emotions, all my pent-up anger? If I'm not going to try to seek revenge myself, what do I do with those pent-up emotions? Next verse. Lamentations chapter 2, verse 19 says this, get up and pray for help all through the night. It's usually at night that those emotions come in strongest. Get up and pray for help all through the night. Pour out your feelings to the Lord as you would pour out water out of a jug. What a beautiful verse. Pour out all your frustrations. God can handle that. Pour out your anger, your bitterness. You can tell God that. God can handle that. And you pour it out to him. Now, you notice I said learn to forgive, because forgiveness has to be learned. Forgiveness is not natural. Forgiveness is not easy. Forgiveness is not fast. And when you're traumatized, it makes it even harder. And sometimes well-meaning people have actually hurt victims of trauma by pushing them to forgive faster than they really should. They have to work through the stages of grief. Now, here's what the president said recently, and then I want to ask you about this. There's no way to fully comprehend the loneliness and the anger of genocide survivors. And yet, time and time again, we've asked them to make the sacrifices necessary to give our nation new life. Someone once asked me why we keep burdening survivors with the responsibility for our healing. It was a painful question, but I realized that the answer was obvious. Survivors are the only ones with something left to give. And what they have to give is their forgiveness. That is so eloquent. That's just eloquent. How have you led a traumatized nation to do this?
It's very difficult, but I think, as again in the speech you were saying, the truth is stubborn, and we must be very stubborn to cope with the situation as well. So we keep trying, and we keep communicating, we keep questioning, we keep finding answers. And for forgiveness, you don't expect everyone to forgive. And I think people will understand. If people decide not to forgive, you will understand. Much as we keep asking people to forgive.
Sure.
But forgiveness may come as a result, as a result of deep understanding, based on many things we talked earlier. And trust and forgiveness are in a way related. Once you have created trust, which will depend on what you've come out to do, that will convince many people that maybe the situation, first of all, they understand the situation they are having to deal with, they understand it. Then from action carried out by leaders, by government, by, people will start reading from these actions that maybe the situation is different from what they faced before. And forgiveness also may come as a result of realizing that, well, first we have to live the future. We have to have better life coming for us. How do we get there? Then you don't forget that you've lost so much. You keep that in mind. But people in Rwanda have found it possible to forgive so that they create a better future, and so that we stop losing even the little we remained with.
Are you hearing what he's saying? That forgiveness, we don't forgive for the other people's sake, we forgive for our own sake, because first, we don't want to hold on to the pain, it keeps hurting us, and second, we're going to need the forgiveness ourselves, and third, we want a better future.
Yes.
So you don't say, well, they don't deserve the forgiveness. Well, of course they don't, but you don't either for your forgiveness. But you forgive not because they deserve it, because they don't, but you forgive because you want the better future and you don't want to hold on to the pain. That's good, that's profound.
And you really can't go to those people who were responsible for the evil that happened and ask from them anything. Or you can, in fact, what you are expected to be doing is to be holding them accountable. I'm sure the immediate thing that comes to people's mind, especially in my country, is that those people should have gone to jail or should have even been hanged.
Right.
So you don't ask them anything. That's why we turn to the survivors, the victims, and say, the situation is, as we all know it, or is like this. There is a way out of this. It doesn't explain all the pain we carry or provide sufficient relief to that. But everyone needs to live into the future. So how do we do that without, one, holding accountable to an extent the people responsible, but on the other, bringing everyone along so that, and that can only be facilitated by the forgiveness of the people who have suffered the most.
Those who suffered the most.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who have really been bearing the brunt of what has happened in the country.
You know, almost 15 years ago, I asked the president this question. I said, so what is it, as a leader, why do you not feel the need to retaliate? He said something very profound. He said, leadership absorbs the pain. I wish every leader in the world could learn that principle. Leadership absorbs the pain. And in other words, if you hit me and I hit you back, and then you poke out my eye and I poke out your eye, and we both end up blind, at some point, somebody takes the last shot and you go, okay, fine, you got the last shot. I'm not going to retaliate. Because we're going to stop this right here. Because we're actually more interested in the future.
Or you retaliate until when?
Yeah, exactly. Then he wins because he's made you a mean person.
It keeps going, and that becomes the life you live. You live
just
a life
perpetuate it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's go to the fourth principle of recovery. And this has to do with hope. You've got to have hope. Hope and trust God for the strength to recover. Hope and trust God for the strength to recover. You can't move forward without hope. You can't move forward without faith. You have to have faith in God, faith in yourself. You have to have faith in others. You have to have faith that you can move, that you're not paralyzed, that you're not helpless, you're not hopeless. You need hope and you need faith. Jeremiah 29:11, God says, the plans I have for you are plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. God has plans. God's plans have hope and have a future. God is a God of recovery. He is a God of restoration. This week, I went through the whole Bible, and I found 32 times where God says, I will restore you. 32 times. God is a God of restoration. And there's story after story after story of a nation falling, particularly Israel, and then God restoring, and a nation falling, and God restoring, God falling. If you've had any trauma, particularly the kind we're talking about today, where perpetrated by an individual, by evil against you, I recommend this next verse for you. Job 11:13-19 gives a lot of good advice. It says this: give your whole heart to God and hold out your hands for him to help you. Then you will lift your face without shame. God doesn't want you living in shame. You will lift your face without shame. You will stand firm without fear. God doesn't want you living in fear. Then all your troubles will fade from your memory like water under a bridge. Your life will be brighter than the sunshine at noon, and life's darkest hour will shine like the dawn. You will live secure and full of hope. God will protect you and give you rest. And you won't be afraid of your enemies. In fact, many people will ask you for help. If ever I read a verse that describes what Rwanda is going through right now, it's that passage right there. that all those things, you get rid of fear. You know, Rwanda's been rated the safest country in Africa. And yeah, go ahead. You can clap for that. He said, you know, your life will be brighter. You know, every time I go, Kigali gets brighter and brighter and brighter. There's more lighting, more electricity through the whole nation. He says that you'll be secure and full of hope. God will protect you and give you rest. You're not afraid of your enemies. In fact, many people will ask you for help. You know, I'll tell you this personally. 7 other African presidents have called me and said, when can we get what's going on in Rwanda? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you know, this Rwanda model peace plan that was created there. And I said, well, I'm happy that you're interested in it. I said, we're just one church. We can't go to every nation all the time like that. I mean, we can't send 3,000 people to every nation. But I said, here's what I can do. I can send the Rwandans because they're trained. And that's what we've been doing. And the peace plan was started in Rwanda. It was birthed in Rwanda at the invitation of the president. Let me read you the countries where it's now going on with their own national boards and committees. Started in Rwanda, then Malawi, Zambia, Ghana, Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Botswana, Tanzania, Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles Islands, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Gabon, Burundi, Liberia, Uganda, Sierra Leone. Starting this year, 2019, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, Madagascar, Egypt, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Somalia, Lesotho, the Gambia, Senegal, Equatorial Guinea, Cape Verde, Sao Tome, Republic of Congo, and Niger. This all started in Rwanda. And that is a tribute and testimony to the people, the character, and the churches of Rwanda. Let me read this quote from the president. Our nation has turned a corner. Fear and anger have been replaced by the energy and purpose that drives us. Ooh, purpose drive. I like that. The purpose that drives us. Sounds like purpose-driven to me. The purpose that drives us forward. In the end, the only conclusion to draw from Rwanda's story is profound hope. Hope for our world. No community is beyond repair, and the dignity of people is never fully extinguished. This is the president speaking. 25 years later, here we are, all of us, wounded and heartbroken, yes, but unvanquished. Our prayers for no other people to ever endure the same tribulation we did, especially our brothers and sisters in Africa. At a memorial event some years ago, a young girl brought us all to tears with a poem. She said, there's a saying in Kinyarwanda that God spends the day elsewhere, but returns every night to sleep in Rwanda. Then she asked the question, so where was God on those dark nights of genocide? Well, looking at Rwanda today, it is clear that God has come back home to Rwanda to stay. Amen. Amen. Years ago, you told me, I realized pretty quickly that the nation could recover quicker if we involved the churches.
Yes.
How's that worked out for you?
It has worked out very well. I have to thank you, Pastor Rick, that with the Saddleback Church, and when you agreed to engage with us in our country, it was in recognition of what we knew that would contribute, and it did. But a little bit of history to that is church in Rwanda became part of the problems we faced in history. In fact, church and colonialism were intertwined, and one serving the other for many decades. And what we saw in 1994, churches became killing sites as well. And religious leaders got involved directly. But at the same time, we also understand the essence and the far reach of faith sector. Churches connect with the people. They have followership, thousands of our citizens. So we thought reforming, in a sense, if I may use the word, this faith sector and sort of assist in returning that to its known
what it should be doing
and expected roles, what it should be doing,
yeah.
Then we had a bigger chance of actually reaching all our citizens and also helping them to recover from the trauma which we talked about, as well as assist in many other ways. And this is what has happened. We've seen, and I wanted to thank you and the entire Saddleback Church, the way they have impacted our people through, and it wasn't just preaching, it wasn't or just preaching in church, it was also preaching on the aspects that will transform our lives.
Lifestyle.
And lifestyles and many things in the country. It talks about health, about business, about the very things that actually add up to what is required for our lives to change and transform as we all wanted to happen. So many things have happened since we got together and since the Saddleback Church has been in Rwanda and working with other denominations, we have seen tremendous change. It's part of the progress, very significant part of progress has been achieved of that.
Well, it's been our honor and your wisdom to invite us. Those of you who are new to Saddleback need to understand that the peace plan is very different. We're not like NGOs. We don't do stuff for people. All we do is training. In the Great Commission that Jesus gave, he said, go into all the world and teach them to do. Teach them to do. It didn't say do it for them. We don't do anything for Rwanda. All we do is teach Rwandans how to do it for themselves. And so our nurses teach nurses, and our doctors teach doctors, and our pastors teach pastors, and our judges teach judges, and farmers teach farmers, and landscapers teach landscapers, and managers and businessmen teach businessmen. We don't do stuff for Rwanda. They're very capable on their own to do it. They're self-reliant. They don't need paternalism. They don't need subsidies. They don't need money thrown at them. What they just need is opportunity. And opportunity often is trade, not aid, okay? And it is giving people a hand up, not a handout. So we don't believe in dependency. For instance, we don't create orphanages. When President Kagame told me we have a problem with orphans because in the genocide it left almost 1 million orphans. And I told him, I said, well, we'll be glad to help with the orphan problem. We just don't believe in orphanages. Because that word's not in the Bible, and it's a Western idea, and there are 135 million orphans in the world. You couldn't build enough orphanages, and when you take a kid off his land, if his mom and dad have died, you're guaranteeing permanent poverty. So we said, we're actually gonna come and help shut the orphanages down. We believe kids belong in families. And so we began a program through the churches of adoption. Adoption is the answer, not orphanages. Here at Saddleback Church, we made a commitment to adopt 1,000 orphans, 500 in the U.S. and 500 outside the U.S. We're over 600 families have adopted here in this church. And so, yeah, you can clap for that. So, what we've done in Rwanda has not been anything we do for them. We don't do anything for them. We go and stand alongside and said, let us help train you in some of the things we're learning. And we together partner in that way. And that way, now they're going out and training other nations. And so what we passed on to them, now they're passing on to others. And that is the multiplication factor. And you should be proud of that. And we're all proud of the fact that the president opened the door for us to work with the churches there. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I have a present, and it's a significant present. You know, what do you give a president, huh? Okay. But there's a Japanese form of ancient artwork called kintsugi. And kintsugi is the art form of mending broken pottery with gold. And this process gives new life to a damaged or aging ceramic by celebrating their frailty and history. In other words, instead of seeing the brokenness as a bad thing, it becomes part of the beauty. And in kintsugi, you put the pieces back together and you put it together with gold, and as a result, the imperfections are actually celebrated because it creates greater beauty. And so we have here for you, Mr. President, a vase of kintsugi that's been rebuilt with gold. And this represents what God has done in Rwanda. He took all these pieces and he put them all back together with gold, making the vase far more beautiful than it was in the first place. And we congratulate you and we celebrate you. Thank you so much. Love you. Thank you so much. Good to see you. There you go. Thank you.